Head over to miniaturemarket.com. They have thousands of board games at discounted prices like MicroMacro Crime City. MicroMacro Crime City is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players where you get this humongous city and a big folded paper map on your table. And the city always has tons of details like a saxophone playing, or someone hiding behind the building, somebody chasing somebody with a wrench and a mask. There's always different things to look at. And you're working on one of 16 different cases from introductory all the way to difficult, and you'll have different questions you're answering from the envelopes. And you're going to be finding different things in different cases like finding the dead victim, or where the killer lurked, or where the murder weapon was, or where the victim lived. All sorts of different questions you'll be asked in different cases. And you'll be working backwards in time, like this baby's hanging out with a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Tracing their footsteps, you see it was then hanging out with a dog earlier. And a little earlier, he was giving a sausage to a homeless man. And giving a balloon to someone in the park. So there might be questions about what did the baby do? How did it get home? Did it get home? Things like that. There's always something unique to look at, and curiosity is the name of this game. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. MicroMacro Crime City is a breath of fresh air. It is a unique concept that feels like nothing else. You can jump right in with introductory cases or even on the box cover. It's kind of a mesh of like a Sherlock Holmes style game with Where's Waldo. You're following a story throughout the city in time and you're seeing different snippets of time, and it's such an interesting thing. You're seeing random things that you're getting pulled off from and red herrings and trying to figure out what's going on that ends up being a future case. The difficulty ramps great from easy to hard, and it's just such a refreshing crime-solving cooperative game. It's best, I'd say, with 1 or 2 players. 3 or 4, it's a little tight because you want to look at the map. There's a misprint or 2 in the cards, a little knock there, and I would have liked to have seen little tracking chips like bingo chips to track it. But if you're looking for a crime-solving cooperative game that's easy to learn, but absolutely fantastic, this is one of the best games of the year, MicroMacro Crime City. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we are crime solvers, cooperatively trying to solve crimes in a very little but very big city called MicroMacro Crime City. This is from Pegasus Spiele. Let me show you how this game works. I'll see you on the other side. The game comes with this humongous paper map that you unfold and takes up almost the entire table. Now in this city map is a lot of detail. I'm showing you basically the part that's shown on the front of the box, but obviously it's in the city as well. And you'll just notice that if you just look around, there is so much happening. Lots of details, like what is this guy doing? He's got a cape and he's got a mask, he's got a wrench, he's chasing something. You've got people coming down on horses, you've got all these different things. You got this guy who's hiding behind a building for some reason, these two having a conversation. There's so much going on in the city as you look at the details of it. Now the game also comes with a magnifying glass that you can kind of use to look even a little bit closer at things, because the drawings are quite small. You need to look pretty closely at them. You don't need to use this if your eyesight's good, but if you really want to see some details as such, this is good to use. Or if you're not really good at seeing small things, you can use this as well. Now the game comes with 16 different cases, everything from an introductory case all the way up to a 5-star difficulty case. And at the beginning of the game, you're going to take all the different case cards and place them in these little envelopes so that each of the cases is in its own envelope. Of course, you don't look at the cards because there's lots of spoilers in here. By the way, I'm not going to spoil any of the cases in this overview or review. Now these case cards have you do different things or different tasks. I've purposely not shown you which case this is from with the icon or anything like that, but you'll be doing different things like finding the dead victim. They'll give you a story, which I'm not showing you, and then you'll have to find it based upon the introduction. On the back of this, once you know the answer, if you found it, you'll flip it over and it will show you the answer and you'll see if you're right or wrong. Typically one person will say if you're right or wrong. If you're wrong, they can give you some hints, but they can't help you on that task. Or you can just play this game solo and see if you've got it right, and if not, well, then you know the answer and you keep going. But there's lots of different questions, like you might be finding the victim, or you'd be finding where the killer lurked, Or maybe after that, you're trying to find the murder weapon, or maybe where the victim lived, and things like that. I'm not going to show you all these, even though you don't know which case this is from, but those are the types of things you're going to be trying to figure out. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm going to actually show you something that's not part of a actual case in the game. But if you look here, you'll see that there's a woman walking the street and she's crying if you look close into her eyes. And most of what you'll be doing in this game is seeing something and then sort of working your way back in time, because you'll see this person in different spots of the city and it's essentially their day of how they've gone through things. So we see this lady who's walking across the street and she has, she's just very sad, but she's walking in this direction. So if we start looking back in this direction or maybe this direction, we could see where she was coming from. Now a little bit further back we've looked and here she is, she's crossing this other street, she's still crying. What's going on with her? And if we follow that back to this street here, we can see, if you look really closely, there she is right there. She was walking down this way and she's crying, but there's only the balloon. Does this person have anything to do with this? Did she take her balloon from her? Why is she crying? So you're trying to put together all these different things. And if I trace back far enough, I'll find that she's talking to this police officer and looking very distraught. So something had happened to her earlier that day. And I look back even further and she's standing at this restaurant looking very distraught. What is going on? And if we follow that a little bit earlier, here she is, she's yelling. What is she doing? What's going on with her? And if I go back a lot to a different part of the city, there she is. She's talking to a friend and she has a baby in the carriage. And then I come over here and we say, oh, well, she's saying bye to her friend, but the baby left the carriage. And we could see here the baby actually got out and started walking. And so the baby left and she didn't know about that. So she's probably very upset because she just realized that she's lost her baby. And sure enough, a little bit further down the road, this is where she finally realized it and then started running, looking for the cop, and then was crying. So those are the types of things you're doing. You're trying to put together different pieces of the puzzle, but a lot of the times you're looking for things around it of what would have caused this to happen. And you'll find yourself looking at different things in the city and following their stories and not being able to stop. Like, there's the baby, he's at the cheese store getting some cheese. What is going on here? And much later on during the day, you see the baby ends up giving the cheese to the dog. So there's all these different things going on. Now again, this is a non-spoiler, no part of the case type of thing, but this is how you typically follow stories throughout the city, and you're looking around at what's going on. You see the baby, was at the corner, and then you go down here, but you're also looking at what else was going around, especially if you're looking for a killer or someone that is a victim. And generally speaking, that's what you're trying to do, is put together pieces of the puzzle. And it's really hard to do this for you without spoiling it, but this is about as best as I could do, because I know that this isn't one of the 16 cases. So if this was a case, the case questions might have been, why was the mother upset? Why was she crying? What happened? Well, he lost a baby. Well, then what are some of the things the baby did? And you would have to point some of them out. And then I'd say, hey, did the baby ever get home? If so, how did it get there? Was it taxi? Was it bus? Things like that. And so those are the types of questions you'd ask if this were a case. That's pretty much it. Trying to get through all the cases cooperatively. And as you can see, there's always lots of little details going on in the city. Lots of things to make you wonder, I wonder what's going on here. So often when we review games, we just see a lot of the same things, a lot of reiterated ideas, a lot of taking a bit of this and tweaking a little and putting it with a bit of that and tweaking that a little, and everything seems somewhat derivative, and it's not that often that we see a game that feels unique. Now granted, I could still probably describe this game as, it's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes consulting detective with a Where's Waldo? Like, there's some frame of reference for it, but I've never quite played anything like this, and it feels unique and it feels fresh. With that being said, here's some of the other things I like about this game. You could jump right into this game with the introductory case. You just take the case out, it pretty much teaches you the rules as you go. It's very easy, just crack open the box and start. You can also start by playing this tiny little 30-second case on the cover of the box, and that's a really cool way to sort of jump in, and that's actually part of the map itself, which is really cool. So if you like Sherlock Holmes style games and you like deducing clues by just looking at things, that's what this game is all about. I love that you're following the story throughout the city in time, where you're like, oh, I see this thing. What is going on here? Okay, let me start tracing backwards where they were coming from and see what was going on. Oh, wow, okay, well, they did this, they tripped over this, they lived here. Well, now let's go forward from that and see what's going on. And I love how it just has these time snippets in every grid section is basically a snapshot in time, and you're working your way and seeing what this person was doing, or what, there's many different things you're looking at, but it's just such a unique concept of watching through and walking through and tracing back and seeing things in time. It's such a cool idea, and it works so well here. I love all the random things that you see when you're looking for something else. Like you're looking for something and you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. Let me look at this. Wow, what's going on here? And your curiosity just takes you like off the path sometimes. And you're like, I've got to figure out what's going on over here because there's so many unique little things. And who knows, some of those might, come as cases a little bit later, but you definitely get pulled off track a lot because it's so interesting to see what's going on there. I like that the difficulty ramps up over time. The beginning cases are very easy. The later ones take a lot more work. Some of them took me even an hour to do. Not that there was that many more steps, but just that it was harder. And so there was a lot of other red herrings that I was seeing trying to figure things out. I like that you're following others around subjects and you're discerning if they're involved. Like the one I had showed you earlier in this video, to not spoiler because it's not part of a case, was the baby. And it's like, at one point I thought the baby was involved in this other story. I'm like, why is this baby following the subject that I'm looking at? This is so weird. Let me go back and look at the baby. And I'm looking through and I'm like, okay, yeah, the baby, as I showed you, escaped from the stroller, it found some cheese, it gave a dog with cheese, found a balloon, gave a balloon away, it took the subway, it hung out in the park with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, it got on a bus, and like this baby got on a bus and I, for the life of me, could not figure out where it went after that. And I was pretty sure at that point it didn't have to do with my case, but it didn't matter. I needed to figure out what happened to this baby and where did this bus, so I'm looking for all these different buses. I couldn't find it. Eventually I figured out what happened, but I'll leave out what happens there. It's a fun little side story to check out what happens. Does the baby make it home? If so, how? Pretty interesting. Anyway, so that all tied together to the mom running to the cop that I showed you, the crying. So you have all these things that are going on, and that happens a lot where you're like, it looks like this might have something to do with the subject that I'm following, and you kind of go off these little like spider points to see what's going on. Does this have relativity to the story that I'm talking about, I'm trying to solve? A lot of times you're remembering a scene that you saw from a past chase in the future. So like there's a couple of times where you look and you're like, oh, what is this? Like I just mentioned, and it didn't turn out to be anything. But then later on, like in a future case, you're like, oh my gosh, I followed that person. I remember. So it was part of like a future story, which is kind of cool. The game has great value, even though it's not really replayable. Once you play it, you know the things. You could probably watch others play it and have fun watching them play it, but you're probably not going to play it yourself. But even with that being said, I think it's a great value because there's 16 cases here. I cannot wait for them to come out with more. The game is great solo. I've played a handful of these solo. They work fine. They work great. Now on to the negative side of things. MicroMacro is a single word. So if you're trying to look this up on Board Game Geek, you have to spell it all in one word. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but that's a little bit of a negative there. So if you're looking it up on Board Game Geek, MicroMacro is one word. Now, the real things that I feel like this game could have improved with is, especially for the first half of the cases, they're not quite as good with 3 or 4 players. Because if you look at the map from the sides or upside down, it's just literally harder to see things, and it's not as enjoyable. You really want to be looking at the map right on, and granted the map's really big, but still to fit 4 heads and 4 people and shoulders looking at stuff, you're going to be really tight. So if you don't mind that, then it's fine. Now later on, 3 of the cases have multiple cards out at the same time. So players can be, you work on this, you work on this, you work on this, and that works fine. And even in some of the harder cases that don't have that, there's times where it's like, what, you're confused and you're like, well, what should I do? Oh, this looks really interesting. This one's around our subject more than once. Why don't you follow back and see what this person has to do with it? Why don't you check this person out and you go follow this one and see if that has anything to do with it? So you can actually be working on more things at once in some of the harder cases when you're stuck. But generally speaking, 1 or 2 players, I think this game really shines at. 3 or 4 for some of the more difficult cases. It can work, it's just pretty tight. There is also a misprint on one of the cards. It's card number 4 in the Big Betty case, where one of the answers, there was a bunch of things you had to find. I couldn't find one of them that were listed, and they left out the actual grid that it was in. Like, the grid's like A1, stuff like that. That's not it, but they left that out. So a little bit of a misprint there made me trip up a little bit in one of the cases. Not the end of the world, though. Definitely not for those who don't have good sight, because the map is big, but you're looking at a lot of small details. Yes, the magnifying glass helps, but if you don't have really good sight, this game might not be the best one for you. Also, I would have loved to have seen those little transparent sort of bingo chips. Some of the red chips you see in like Letters from Whitechapel that you could use to track different things, because sometimes you're tracking where someone went, sometimes you're tracking where somebody else went. It'd be good to have a few different colors of those chips, like red, green, blue, and yellow, and you can kind of track where people have gone. That would have been a good thing to improve the game even more. But with that being said, I'm nitpicking here. This is one of the most freshest, unique games I've played in a long time. I am super high on this game. I absolutely love it. I think it's one of the best games of the year, actually. Even though it's a small little game, it's so unique and so fun and so immersive. You'll remember these stories of what these different things did throughout the game. And for that, it's definitely getting a saxophone serenade, staying in my collection, so let's hit it. Lucky Duck Games has 4 new games available now. In the Court of Miracles, you lead a guild of beggars, scheme with sinister plots, and use trickery to build your own renown in an attempt to take over 16th century Paris. Baron Voodoo is an abstract strategy game involving the collection of thematic soul dice, and it made my top 10 most anticipated releases at Pegasus Spiele this year. Kingdom Rush Rift in Time is a tower defense with epic heroes that includes a campaign and an infinite replayability mode. It was hugely popular on Kickstarter, raising over $1 million. Chronicles of Crime 1400 is a standalone follow-up to the award-winning Chronicles of Crime, where you'll be solving 4 unique crimes in medieval Paris. These are all available in stores now, and you can learn more and order them at luckyduckgames.com.